Ambassador Shankar, even though government sources have told ET now that this visit should not be looked at from the lens of being a bilateral summit, a bilateral visit, but the fact remains that the timing of this visit cannot be ignored. We do have Trump's tariffs and sanctions on Russian entities, and of course India continues to face those 50% tariffs by the United States. So how is the United States likely to look at this upcoming visit and of course the meeting between the two leaders?
Well, the U.S. itself is seeking a peace deal on Ukraine and has been meeting with Russia. The talks, in fact, with Russia had gone well, and then there was a pushback from the Europeans and Ukraine on the 28-point peace plan, which President Trump had unveiled. And in the wake of the consultations with Europe and Ukraine, some modifications have been made to that, and fresh talks are going on with between Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner and the Russians. So it's not as though the U.S. is not in itself engaged in outreach to Russia. Also, U.S. oil companies are looking out for the opportunity to actually invest in Russia's resources. And if you take a look at the U.S. peace plan, then that 28-point peace plan, we don't know how much of it survives. But in that, the U.S. proposes that Russia's frozen assets, about $300 billion of which have been frozen by the Europeans, will be used. $100 billion will be given to the U.S. for rebuilding of Ukraine, and the remainder will be used for joint U.S.-Russian investments, and, the U.S. will get a share of the profits. So the U.S. is already looking beyond the possibility of a peace deal to actually re-engaging with Russia economically, the gradual lifting of sanctions, and reintegration of Russia into the G8. So it's a little bit, what could I say, inexplicable as to why then the U.S. would keep sanctions on India for import of Russian oil. But I think as far as India is concerned, I think it's important for us to create our own space in terms of the global balance of power. And for that, we can't be dependent on one country. We have to have multiple partners. And Russia has proven a very steady partner over the years, particularly in the field of defense, nuclear energy, space. Yes, the economic relationship has been thin. After the end of the rupee-ruble trade, the economic relationship between India and Russia collapsed, actually. And we have been trying to rebuild it, but it hasn't really gone far. Russia today doesn't really look at India to that extent. It looks at Europe, China, and the U.S. But given that the U.S. and Europe have proved somewhat fickle in terms of how they have handled their own ties with Russia, leading to conflict in Ukraine, that Russia would also be looking now perhaps more seriously at India. And certainly India should be looking more seriously at Russia, given the fact that there are tensions in our relationship with the U.S., which has proved unreliable. And rebuilding that trust is going to take time. But also because our relationship with China, the other great power, are also not on an even keel, because there are tensions on the border. And Europe, in a sense, takes the lead from the U.S. So I think it's important for India to balance its relations with the great powers by creating space for itself through multiple engagements
Absolutely.
and through diversifying its economic relationship.